My name is Sasha. I'm 30 years old. Some words build you up, others are designed to tear you down. We all hear them, don't we? The whispers of doubt from a teacher, the laughter from friends who just don't get it, the quiet disappointment of a family that wants you to be something else. But the most dangerous words, the ones that truly cut deep, come from the people who are supposed to be your rock. Words spoken with a quiet finality, meant to be the end of the conversation, the end of a dream. I know those words. I know their weight. They were handed to me not as a warning, but as a verdict. For a long time, I carried them like a stone. But this isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about the strange and powerful alchemy of doubt. It's about what happens when you decide that a stone meant to drown you can be used as a cornerstone instead. My mother once looked me right in the eyes. Her own gaze wasn't angry, but something far worse, pitying, and told me I would never amount to anything. She said it with a certainty that was meant to break me. It was a Tuesday. I just told her I was quitting my secure, respectable accounting job to chase an idea. This wispy concept about artificial intelligence that nobody, least of all her, could wrap their head around. She didn't yell. She just gave me this small, sad smile and delivered the line. "You'll fail," she said, as casually as if stating the time. "You don't have what it takes. You'll come crawling back here in 6 months." For a moment, her words almost worked. For a moment, the world she painted for me was the only one I could see. This is the story of how that anchor became my rocket fuel, and how the name she thought would be forgotten is now one she hears everywhere she goes. The silence that followed her words was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, not just on my career, but on her belief in me. I was 26, holding a piece of paper, my resignation letter, that felt like both a death warrant and a declaration of independence. For 3 years, I'd been the model son. I'd followed the path she championed: university, a practical degree, a job with a pension plan at some mid-tier accounting firm. It was a life painted in shades of beige. Predictable, safe, and soul-crushingly empty. Every day, I sat in a cubicle under fluorescent lights, reconciling numbers that represented other people's ambitions. My own felt like a secret, shameful hobby. Late at night, long after the spreadsheets were closed, I'd lose myself in a world of code, logic, and artificial intelligence. It wasn't just a pastime. It felt like I was learning my native language after a lifetime of speaking a foreign tongue. I was devouring academic papers on neural networks, tinkering with open-source machine learning models, and slowly, an idea began to take shape. It was an idea about using AI not just to predict what people might buy or to write clever ads, but to speed up one of the most complex processes on Earth: scientific discovery, specifically drug development. The concept was audacious, probably naive, but it burned in my mind. It was a fire I couldn't put out, so I saved every penny. I lived in a tiny apartment, drove a car that was more rust than metal, and poured every spare second and dollar into this secret passion. The plan? Give myself a runway of 1 year. 1 year to turn this obsession into something real. When I told her, I wasn't looking for a loan or a place to crash. I was just looking for a sliver of encouragement. A simple, "That sounds tough, but I believe in you." Instead, I got a eulogy for a future she had already planned out. "Accounting is a good life, Jacob," she'd said, her voice laced with that familiar, weary disappointment. "It's stable. People respect it. This computer thing, it's a fantasy, a child's game. You are throwing away a perfectly good life for a dream that will never happen." I remember the way she looked right past me, out the window, as if my failure was already a foregone conclusion, a boring movie she'd already seen. "You'll never succeed," she repeated, just to make sure the verdict was final. "You just don't have it in you." I didn't argue. What was there to say? Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, and the pain was sharp, visceral. It's a specific kind of pain that comes from the person who brought you into the world telling you that you are fundamentally inadequate. The child in me, the one who always craved her approval, felt a crushing wave of shame. For a few days, that shame was all I could feel. Her voice became my own inner critic, a relentless echo in the quiet of my apartment. You're not smart enough. You're not disciplined enough. She's right. But then, something shifted. The pain started to curdle. It twisted into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. It was anger. A deep, defiant anger. It wasn't about hating her. It was about hating the box she'd put me in. The life sentence she had pronounced without a trial. That night, I sat in front of my computer, the screen glowing in the dark. Her words replayed in my head, but this time, they didn't sound like a verdict. They sounded like a dare, a line drawn in the sand. And in that moment, I made a vow. Not some loud, dramatic declaration. It was a quiet, cold promise to myself. I would not fail. I would not come crawling back. I would build something so big, so undeniable, that she would have no choice but to see it. She wouldn't just see it, she'd be surrounded by it. My success would become the background noise of her life. I wasn't just going to prove her wrong. I was going to make my name an echo of the potential she refused to see. That vow was the first brick. The pain she'd given me, meant to be a poison, was about to become the most potent fuel I had ever known. The first 6 months were a brutal education in humility. I moved out of my decent apartment and into a room in a shared house on the dingy outskirts of the city, a place where the rent was cheap and the ambition was thick in the air. My office was a corner of my bedroom, a rickety desk piled high with secondhand textbooks, and a monitor that flickered if you bumped the table. The money from my old job vanished with terrifying speed, eaten up by rent, server costs, and a truly epic amount of instant noodles. My mother's words became a haunting soundtrack. Every time a line of code failed, every time an email to a potential advisor went unanswered, her voice was there. See? I told you, you don't have what it takes. That was the real war, the one waged inside my own head before I could even start fighting the one outside. The low self-esteem she had so carefully cultivated over the years was now a roaring beast I had to slay every single morning. My idea was to create an AI platform, which I named Ethelred, a nod to an old king known for being ill-advised. A little private joke about the chorus of doubt I was ignoring. Ethelred wasn't just another predictive model. It was designed to be an autonomous research agent. You could feed it a complex biological problem, like modeling a protein interaction for a new cancer drug, and it would not only analyze existing data, but would design its own virtual experiments, run them in simulation, learn from the results, and iterate millions of times a day. Basically, a tireless, brilliant scientist in a box. The problem was, I was just one guy. The sheer scale of it all was overwhelming. There were nights I'd work for 18 hours straight, fueled by cheap coffee, only to realize I'd been chasing a bug down a rabbit hole and had made zero actual progress. I was drowning. The loneliness was a physical presence. My friends from my old life stopped calling. Our worlds just didn't overlap anymore. They talked about promotions and mortgages. I talked about recursive neural networks and protein folding. I was an alien speaking a language they didn't care to learn. I tried to get funding. I put on my one good suit, which now felt like a costume from a past life, and pitched my idea to a handful of local angel investors. They were polite but dismissive. I was a former accountant with no PhD, no team, and no product. Just a wild idea. They saw risk. They saw a kid in way over his head. After one particularly brutal rejection, a venture capitalist literally laughed as he walked me out, patting me on the shoulder. "Stick to the numbers, son," he said. "This ain't for you." That night, I just sat in my car, unable to drive. The weight of it all was crushing. My bank account was almost empty. I had nothing to show for months of relentless effort, but a half-working prototype and a pile of rejections. My mother's prediction of crawling back felt less like an insult and more like an imminent reality. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over her number. The temptation to just quit To admit she was right was immense. To trade this terrifying uncertainty for the dull, predictable safety I'd left behind. But then, the other voice kicked in. The one forged in anger and defiance. The one that remembered the pity in her eyes. I put the phone down. Failure was an option, sure, but proving her right, that was not. The fear of her, "I told you so," was officially greater than my fear of starvation. That night was a turning point. I realized I couldn't do it alone, and I couldn't do it here. I sold my car, packed 2 suitcases, and bought a one-way bus ticket to Silicon Valley. It felt like both a pilgrimage and an exile. I was moving across the country, not just for the opportunity, but to put physical distance between me and the gravitational pull of my old life and its low expectations. I landed in the Bay Area with less than $2,000 to my name and found a bunk bed in a hacker house. A crowded, chaotic place filled with other desperate dreamers running on fumes and ambition. The place smelled of stale pizza and sleep deprivation. It was awful, and it was exactly what I needed. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language. People who got the obsession. We'd stay up until 4 a.m., covering whiteboards and equations, fueled by caffeine and a shared, frantic energy. It was in that house that I met Lena, a brilliant, withdrawn systems architect who dropped out of a Stanford PhD program, and Sam, a fast-talking, impossibly optimistic marketing guy who could sell ice to a polar bear. They saw what the investors hadn't. They didn't see a former accountant. They saw the raw, obsessive passion. They saw Ethelred. Lena tore my code apart and helped me rebuild it, stronger, faster, more elegant. Sam started crafting a narrative, turning my tech jargon into a story about revolutionizing science. We became a team. The relentless journey phase truly began. We worked out of that hacker house, then a cramped garage. This was the montage, but it didn't feel like one. It felt like an endless marathon. No weekends, no social life. Our entire existence was those 4 garage walls. We were driven by a collective desperation and running out of money fast. The perfectionism my mother's criticism had burned into me was both a superpower and a curse. I'd spend days refining a single algorithm, convinced that anything less than flawless was a total failure. Lena had to literally pull me away from the keyboard some nights, reminding me that done is better than perfect. We survived on a tiny seed investment from a professor Lena knew, just enough to keep the servers running and afford a diet of rice and beans. The try-fail cycles were constant. We'd get a promising result from Ethelred, only to find it was a statistical fluke. Every no felt like another nail in the coffin, a confirmation of my mother's prophecy. Her voice was still there, but it was fainter now, drowned out by the noise of our work and the quiet, steady belief of my partners. Our first small win came after nearly a year in that garage. A small research lab focusing on rare genetic disorders agreed to a pilot program. They gave Ethelred a problem that had stumped their human researchers for 2 years, identifying potential drug compounds to target a specific misfolded protein. For 3 weeks, our platform churned. We watched, mesmerized, as it ran millions of virtual experiments. Then, one Wednesday morning, it spit out a list of 3 novel compounds, complete with detailed projections. We sent the report to the lab, not daring to hope. A week later, I got a call from the lead researcher. His voice was trembling. "We've tested the primary compound," he said. "The in vitro results. They're not just promising, they're better than anything we could have imagined. How did you do this?" That was it. The first crack of light. It wasn't a $1 million contract, but it was something more valuable. Validation. Proof. For the first time, my success wasn't just a theory, it was a tangible result. I remember walking out of the garage and just staring at the sky. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt relief. A loosening of a knot I'd been carrying for years. I didn't even think to call my mother. Her world felt 1 million miles away. That one case study was the key. Sam turned it into a weapon. He wrote a white paper and leaked it to a few niche tech blogs. The story was too good to ignore. A tiny, bootstrapped startup out of a garage had achieved a breakthrough in weeks that had stumped scientists for years. The first article appeared in a respected tech journal. Then another. Then Forbes called for their 30 under 30 list. Suddenly, the investors who had laughed me out of their offices were calling us. Their tone was a little different now. We closed our first real round of funding, $10 million, in a whirlwind 2 weeks. We moved out of the garage and into a real office in Palo Alto. We hired a team of brilliant engineers and scientists. The dream was no longer a flicker in the dark, it was a roaring fire. And through it all, I worked. The success didn't quiet the drive, it amplified it. That inner critic, my mother's voice, was still there, but it had changed its tune. It no longer said, "You will fail." It whispered, "Don't screw this up. This could all disappear." The fear of failure was replaced by the fear of losing what I had built. I hadn't just built a company, I had built a fortress against her words, and I was determined to make it impregnable. The ascent was meteoric, and frankly, terrifying. Ethelred wasn't just a promising startup, it was becoming an essential tool in biotech and pharma research. Our AI was accelerating drug discovery for everything from Alzheimer's to pediatric cancers, saving companies billions of dollars and years of time. The name Ethelred started appearing in scientific journals in the footnotes of major medical breakthroughs. My name, as its founder, started appearing right alongside it. I imagine the first time my mother heard my name was on the evening news. Our company had just signed a landmark partnership with a global pharmaceutical giant, a deal big enough to make the national segment. I can just picture her in her living room, the same one where she delivered her verdict, listening to an anchor talk about Jacob Renner and his revolutionary AI. I wonder if she made the connection right away. But soon, the echoes became impossible to ignore. Our logo was everywhere. My face was on the cover of Wired, then Fortune. The headline for that one was a little too on the nose. The accountant who redesigned the future of medicine. I thought about sending her a copy, but it felt petty. The work was the point, not the "I told you so." The real moment that everywhere truly began was quieter, and because of that, more powerful. My cousin, her sister's son, was a medical student. He called my mother one afternoon, excited about a new tool they were being taught in his pharmacology class, a platform that could model drug interactions with incredible speed. He talked about how it was the future. The platform was Ethelred. He mentioned the founder, a guy named Jacob Renner, and how he was a huge inspiration. My aunt told me later my mother was quiet for the rest of that phone call. I hadn't spoken to her in over 2 years. Not out of anger, but because our worlds were so different, there was nothing left to say. My father would call me occasionally. He was a quiet man, always caught in the middle, but he was proud. He was the one who told me she'd seen the Fortune magazine. Said she bought a copy at the grocery store and just left it on the kitchen counter for a week. Not reading it, but not throwing it away either. Just sitting there, a silent testament. Then, about a year after the company went public, a day my net worth soared to a figure so absurd it felt like a typo. I had to go back to my hometown for a wedding. I dreaded it. I knew I'd see her. The thought filled me with a familiar, cold anxiety. What would I say? What would she say? I saw her across the reception hall. She looked smaller. Her friends, the women she'd played bridge with for 30 years, were buzzing around her, pointing at me, whispering. My success, the thing she deemed impossible, had now become her primary source of social status. I was her son, the tech billionaire. The irony was suffocating. I walked over. The chatter died. It was just the two of us. She looked at me, and for the first time, the pity was gone. It was replaced by something I couldn't read. Confusion? Awe? Regret? She spoke first. Her voice was thin. "Your father told me about the company. It seems you've done well." It was the understatement of the century. I just nodded. "I've been busy." A long, awkward pause hung in the air, and then she asked the one question I never expected. It wasn't an apology. An apology was beyond her. It was a question, filled with genuine bewilderment. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Why didn't you tell me it was going to be all this?" In that moment, all the anger, all the resentment I had held onto for years just evaporated. It wasn't replaced by forgiveness. It was replaced by a profound, aching sadness. She didn't get it. She never would. She thought success was a destination you could see on a map. She couldn't comprehend a journey into the unknown. She didn't understand that her doubt wasn't an obstacle I had to overcome. It was the very engine of my creation. Her saying I would fail was a necessary ingredient. Without her words, I might still be in that cubicle, my dreams dying a quiet, respectable death. I didn't try to explain. What was the point? I just gave her a small, sad smile of my own. "You wouldn't have believed me," I said, and that was it. The reckoning was over. No grand scene, no dramatic reconciliation, just the quiet, devastating understanding that we were strangers who shared a history. The victory didn't feel triumphant. It felt hollow. I had spent years building a fortress to prove something to someone who was incapable of understanding the proof. The name she heard everywhere was a monument to a conversation she probably didn't even remember the same way. I had won, but I was the only one who knew what the game was. My journey was fueled by a single moment of doubt. It took me to places I never imagined, but it also came at a cost. We all have those voices in our heads, the ones telling us we're not good enough, not smart enough, not ready. Sometimes they're our own. Sometimes they're put there by others. The question is, what do you do with them? Have you ever had a moment of rejection or doubt that secretly shaped who you are? Share your story in the comments. I read as many as I can, and I believe our stories of resilience are the most powerful things we have. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing. We're all on a journey, and it's better when we don't walk it alone. In the end, success is a strange thing. It silences the critics, but it doesn't always heal the wounds that made you seek it in the first place. My mother's words sent me on a relentless quest for external validation, and I found it in spades. I have the money, the accolades, the global brand. My name is everywhere, just like I vowed it would be. But the real lesson wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about proving myself right. It was about learning that self-belief isn't something someone else can give you, and it's not something they can take away unless you let them. The fire that drives you has to come from within. Rejection, doubt, even ridicule, they can be the spark, the fuel that gets the engine started. But you're the one who has to steer. Don't build your life to prove your doubters wrong. Build it to prove your own potential right. Build it for you. Because at the end of the day, you're the only one who has to live there.